In a small town in Spain, a priest embarked on an unexpected challenge. With full confidence, he insulted Islam, belittled the Hajj pilgrimage, and even worse, tore up the Quran in front of many people. But what happened next not only changed his views, but also his life. Let's read this story until the end, and hopefully those who subscribe will have their fortune smooth. In the midst of the noisy interfaith debate in a large hall of the Santa Maria Church in Spain, the atmosphere suddenly turned heated. Father Miguel, a well-known priest who was known to be vocal and critical of other religions, stood up with a confident face. In front of hundreds of attendees, including representatives from various religions, he began to throw out harsh arguments against Islam. In a thunderous voice, he called the Hajj pilgrimage an ancient ritual with no modern meaning and accused the Quran of being a book full of contradictions. But what made the entire room fall silent was when he reached into his pocket, took out a mini Quran, and carelessly tore it up one by one. "Who can answer my challenge?" he shouted with an arrogant laugh. He knew this was not just a test of faith, but also an opportunity to defend the truth. Umar could not remain silent. He stood up slowly but firmly. His voice was soft but clear. "I want to accept your challenge." All eyes were immediately on him. Some people looked doubtful. There were also those who smiled sarcastically. Father Miguel looked at him with a look full of contempt. "Who are you? What are your qualifications?" he asked in a mocking tone. "My name is Umar," he answered calmly. Father Miguel looked a little nervous, but he tried to stay upright. "Okay, let's see if you can stand my questions," he said with a sneer. Umar sat down in the debate chair, took a deep breath, and said quietly, "I submit to you, O Allah. Guide my tongue to the truth." Father Miguel launched his first attack. "First, how do you explain the fact that the Prophet Muhammad married Aisha when she was only 9 years old? Isn't that a form of child exploitation?" The audience was divided. Some supported it, while others became emotional. Umar answered calmly. "First, let me explain the historical context. In those days, the age of marriage was very different due to social and environmental conditions. In addition, Aisha, may Allah be pleased with her, was known as one of the greatest female scholars in Islamic history." He then continued with historical and psychological data that had many nodding in agreement. "The second question," Father Miguel continued, "why did your God allow polygamy? Isn't that unfair to women?" Umar replied, "Logically, polygamy is not a recommendation, but rather a solution in certain situations, such as war or an imbalance between the number of women and men. The conditions are also strict. They must be fair, both materially and emotionally." "The third question," said Father Miguel in a high tone, "why do women have to wear the hijab? What does it mean if women are not free to express their bodies?" Umar replied softly, "The hijab is not a barrier to freedom, but a symbol of purity and dignity. This is Islam's way of protecting women from objectification." And the last question, Father Mel, how could God speak in the Quran without having a form? Umar's answer shook the souls of all those present. Umar looked at Father Miguel calmly. "Allah is all-hearing and all-seeing, but not like his creatures. He does not need a physical form to speak because he is all-powerful over everything. Revelation was revealed through the angel Gabriel to the Prophet Muhammad, and that is how Allah conveyed his word." His statement was greeted with applause from a number of non-Muslim attendees who were starting to get interested. He then added, "In Islam, the concept of God is not limited by space and time. He is not a human being, not a creature, and cannot be described by the narrow human mind." The scientists and theologians present began to record the answers. A young Catholic figure even appeared to be writing something down in his notebook. Umar not only answered with logic, but also with his heart. He touched their feelings with his wise, flawless explanation. Even some of the initially skeptical jury members began to show expressions of admiration. However, Father Miguel was still not satisfied. He tried to turn the situation around with harsh rhetoric. "You only rely on ancient verses. You cannot live in modern times with such primitive rules." But this time, the sound of applause no longer supported him. Umar smiled lightly and said, "The primitive is the mind that does not want to learn." After all the questions were answered, Umar rose from his seat. "I also have one question for you, Pastor." he said in a soft but firm voice. The noisy voices of the audience slowly died down. Father Miguel's face began to turn red. "Go ahead," he replied in an arrogant tone. Umar looked him straight in the eye. "What is the proof that Jesus is God?" A question that made the entire hall fall completely silent. There was no applause, no whispers, only the pounding of his heart. Father Miguel seemed flustered. He tried to answer with the doctrine of the Trinity, the Incarnation, and original sin. But Umar interrupted him with quotes from the early Gospels that did not mention Jesus as God. Jesus himself said, "The Father is greater than I. Then why do you worship the Son of Man?" Miguel began to get nervous. He tried to answer with a philosophical analogy, but Umar directed the discussion back to historical facts in the original Gospel text. Gradually, Father Miguel fell silent. His eyes were glassy, his hands trembling. He stared at the fragment of the Quran that was still lying on the table, and suddenly tears flowed down his cheeks. Tears continued to flow down Father Miguel's cheeks. He sat back down, bowing his head as if he were fighting with his own conscience. Loud applause from the audience began to be heard. However, it was not to celebrate victory, but rather a form of appreciation for Umar's honesty and determination in defending his religion. Umar did not mock, did not laugh. He just sat there looking at Father Miguel with empathy. "You are a respected priest," he said softly. "I am sure you are also seeking the truth. I do not want to insult you today. I just want us all to seek the light of God together." Suddenly, Father Miguel stood up. With a trembling voice, he said, I have only followed tradition without ever asking. I thought what the church taught was the only truth. But today you have opened my eyes." The entire hall was silent. Even the camera crew seemed to stop moving their lenses, afraid to disturb the sacred moment. "All my life I have believed that Jesus is God," he continued while holding back sobs. "But I can no longer pretend that the doctrine is clear. I need a definite answer, and today I realize that I may be wrong." Umar answered quietly. The truth is never afraid of the priest's questions. It was from there that guidance began to descend. Father Miguel tried to gather words to answer, but his tongue was numb. He looked at the jury members and then at the audience as if seeking moral support, but their faces did not show a spirit of hostility, but rather respect and curiosity. "How should I explain the Trinity if even the Bible does not state it explicitly?" he muttered softly. "If Jesus is God, why did he himself say that the Father is greater than I? If he died on the cross for the sins of mankind? Why does the Bible say that every soul will be held accountable for its own sins?" He looked at Umar and asked, "What should I do now?" Umar smiled warmly. "Start by seeking the truth without prejudice. Read the Quran with a clear heart. Ponder over its verses, and most importantly, pray to Allah to guide you." Father Miguel's face began to calm down, even though his tears had not yet dried. "I want to learn more about Islam," he said in a voice that I can't live in this doubt anymore. And for the first time, the audience's applause was not only in support, but also in prayer. A few days after the debate, a secret invitation was sent to Umar's house. The invitation came from Father Miguel himself. It contained a very sincere apology and an invitation to meet privately in a small prayer room behind the church. During the meeting, Father Miguel wept bitterly. "I never thought I would get to this point," he said in a hoarse voice. "I tore up the Quran. I badmouthed your religion, and you answered me with patience and knowledge. I am truly ashamed." Umar welcomed him with open arms. Islam teaches us to forgive even our enemies. What matters is good intentions today. Miguel stared at the ceiling. I felt like I was born again. I can no longer be a priest if I am no longer sure of what I teach. Then with a trembling voice he said, "I want to convert to Islam." Umar paused for a moment and then said, "The Shahada is something that is easy to say but difficult to keep. Are you ready to face the consequences?" Miguel nodded firmly. "I am ready because this time I am not following tradition or pressure. This is my heart's choice." That day in a small mosque on the outskirts of Madrid, the Shahada ceremony was held simply but meaningfully. The attendees came from various backgrounds: Muslims, Christians, Jews, and even several media figures. They all wanted to witness the spiritual transformation of a priest into a Muslim. Umar stood next to Pastor Miguel, who now chose the name Yusuf Miguel. He led the reading of the 2 sentences of the Shahada with a booming voice, but full of feeling. Ashhadu alla ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. When the sentence was uttered, thunderous applause filled the mosque. Many shed tears of emotion. An elderly woman from the Indonesian Muslim community hugged Yusuf tightly. Meanwhile, a young Catholic youth also cried because he was moved.